A firm owned by Venezuela could be allowed to take over one of this country's top voting machine firms. Venezuela, of course, led by Hugo Chavez. Critics of the deal say our nation's very democracy is now for sale without anyone doing a thing about it.
The use of some 19,000 electronic voting machines in the city of Chicago and Cook County primary on March 21st of this year is now under intense scrutiny. The U.S. company that makes the machines, Sequoia, was bought in 2005 by Smartmatic, a private company primarily owned by Venezuelan businessmen. When Chicago had problems with the machines, a dozen Venezuelan employees were there to help with the election. Chicago officials are outraged.
I think that American elections ought to be run by American companies and ought to be run by American citizens, not Venezuelan nationals.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the president of the company, Jack Blaine, testified to the Chicago City Council. Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela.
Okay, so what are the connections between Dominion and Smartmatic? Are there any? I keep being told there isn't. Well, however, they both bought the same company, Sequoia. Smartmatic bought it in 2005, while a now vice president of Dominion Voting Systems was working there. It was then bought in 2010 by Dominion. The proof I have for you is a February 8, 2010 meeting with the California Secretary of State on the future of voting in California. The now Vice President of Dominion Voting Systems and Director of Product Strategy and Security attended this meeting as an employee of Sequoia Voting Systems. When he testified in Georgia recently, he said that he started at Sequoia in 2005. His main responsibility was design and development of new products. He became vice president of engineering before Sequoia was acquired in 2010 by Dominion, who he is currently working with. He was initially vice president of U.S. engineering for Dominion, but in 2014 migrated to his current role. So, do you really think that when a company is bought by another company for millions of dollars that they don't fold all of the technologies and money-making assets into the parent company? How about this? The same employee that we were just talking about that worked for Sequoia is listed on the patents for Dominion's adjudication process, along with other voting software technologies. But the really disturbing part is that the collateral agent listed on 18 Dominion patents is HSBC Bank Canada, formerly known as the Hong Kong Bank of Canada. But it's okay, no need to worry. It's not a Chinese bank. It's a British multinational investment bank. It just gets its name from Hong Kong Shanghai Banking. Well, actually, it's named after its founding member, the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited, which was established in 1865 to finance the growing trade between Europe, India, and China.
Okay, people, move along. There's nothing to see here.
Okay, the question on people's minds, why is Smartmatic even still here in the Philippines? After reports that it had violated provisions of the election automated law, number one, for example, that it was never supposed to be allowed to bid in the 2010 elections because it did not actually own the software. Dominion Voting Systems owned the software. Plus the difficulty which Smartmatic had to put the COMELEC through just in order to access the source code. Issues like that. Your thoughts? People say we should not be subjected to Smartmatic again this time around.
Well, look, I think that's competitors who say that. You know, the fact is, yes, part of our technology is licensed from Dominion, but you tell me a large technology company which isn't using, in part, licenses from other companies, and we have a license for the international use of that particular piece of the technology that we employ.
License issued by Dominion for you to use their proprietary software. That is a live license. It's an active license. It has not been revoked.
No.
Okay,
No.
all right.
It was never a Venezuelan company. It started in Florida. It was a reaction to this famous hanging Chads case between Gore and Bush, when a couple of young Latin Americans who happened to be Venezuelans said, gosh, we could do better than that, and developed the software and technologies that became Smartmatic.
You did unequivocally point out here that Smartmatic has never been a Venezuelan company, but correct me if I'm wrong, the chairman that had preceded you was a Venezuelan,
Yeah.
and in fact, allegedly, Smartmatic had ties with the late former president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez. How do you explain all of that?
Well, you know, I think the big word is allegedly. The former chairman, who is still CEO, so still very involved in the business, leads it, in fact, you know, was a resident of Florida when these systems were designed.
Yes, allegedly, according to CNN from 2006.
Antonio Mujica and his partner Alfredo Anzola received a small business loan from the Venezuelan government only months before the recall election. These corporate registration documents from Venezuela show the Venezuelan government owned 28% of the stock of another company they started, Vista, which adapted voting software for the Smartmatic machines in the 2004 elections. The same document shows a Chavez government minister, Omar Montillo, was on the board of directors. The Chavez government gave Vista, Smartmatic, and another company a $91 million contract to run voting machines for the 2004 election. The next year, the owners of Smartmatic, primarily owned by Venezuelan businessmen, bought Sequoia, one of the top electronic voting system companies in the United States, for $16 million. Smartmatic is a labyrinth of international holding companies owned by Venezuelan businessmen. Smartmatic Group NV of Curaçao, Netherlands, Antilles owns Smartmatic International BV of Amsterdam, Netherlands, owns Smartmatic Corporation of Florida, which bought Sequoia Voting Systems of California, USA. When Smartmatic bought the U.S. voting machine companies, the U.S. government did not review the sale. Many experts say those voting machines were manipulated in Venezuela to give President Hugo Chavez a victory. Exit polls done by the U.S. firm Penn, Schoen and Berland had Chavez losing 41% to 59%. But the next day, Chavez declared victory, reversing the score, saying he won 59% of the vote.
Everything was computed in the favor of the government. So the only explanation is that the Smartmatic machines had been programmed in that way.
A Harvard mathematician crunched the numbers on the Venezuelan election.
It had to be the Smartmatic system. All these machines talk to a central computer and report on their results. And in that mechanism, as they communicate with the central machine can report anything.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the president of the company, Jack Blaine, testified to the Chicago City Council. Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela.
Joe Biden just named Peter Nethinger, the chairman of Smartmatic's USA board, to his transition team. Before that, he was the administrator of the Transportation and Security Administration, or TSA, under Obama. Even more so, Sequoia, a voting system company, was later acquired by Smartmatic. Although Sequoia later was separated by U.S. authorities and eventually being sold to Dominion, Sequoia's intellectual properties remained with Smartmatic. In other words, as long as Dominion or Smartmatic's voting machines are used, there is a possibility that the election results will be interfered by outside forces, such as in Venezuela.